Guys, I went to the grocery store this morning and do you want to guess what? The Halloween decor is out. A lot of it is like that really gaudy cheap shit, but it got me so excited nonetheless. Happy August. I also know that Spirit Halloween just reopened their doors for the season. Follow my second channel, by the way, for some spooky time vlogs. You know I'm gonna do some shopping there. But that's not the topic of today's video. Today, obviously, I gotta tell you everything that I watched in the month of August. If you're new here, welcome to the cult. Click subscribe to join. I'm the Antichrist, and not only do I talk about horror movies on this channel, but usually in these monthly recaps, I like to talk about all the TV shows that I watch too, and all the non-horror movies. So that is what we'll kick off with, but I also need to go over a few things that I tried to watch this month, because there were a couple of TV shows that didn't really work out. First of all, I tried to watch Ms. Marvel. I know that this came out over a year ago, but if you're around, you know that my family rarely has Disney Plus, and I'm not paying for Disney Plus. I bum it off my parents. So I tried Ms. Marvel, and it's just a little bit too kiddie. I think it's probably a great kids show. Like, it took me back to my days of watching Wizards of Waverly Place or iCarly. That was the vibe it gave. I think I've kind of like aged out of the demographic that show was trying to target, so it just wasn't for me. Neither was Love is Blind. My boyfriend and I tried to watch like the first half hour of the 6th season, having not seen any of the seasons prior, but I feel like it doesn't matter, right? I'm not really interested in neurotypical dating shows. Like, they just don't do it for me. It was really boring, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe I should try Love Island. Maybe I'd be more into like the messy stuff. I don't know. As far as TV shows go though, I am still watching Riverdale. I am in the middle of season 4 now. It's definitely fallen off a little bit. I feel like my interest is probably the lowest that it's been, but I also discovered some really, really good shows because I do have Netflix again. I think I told you guys last month that I had finished Love on the Spectrum. Well, I recently discovered Love on the Spectrum Australia. Same show, just in Australia. Who could have guessed it? Love it. It's basically the same show, so I'm obsessed with it. Also discovered Down for Love. I'm only 2 episodes into the 5-episode first season, but it's the exact same premise as Love on the Spectrum, and it's just so sweet. Maybe I would have been into Love is Blind if I hadn't seen that after watching Love on the Spectrum and Down for Love. Neurotypical people are just not relatable. Like, I don't know. The last sort of TV show that I found was just a 2-part docu-series, so I don't know if you consider that a show, but whatever. Pretty Baby, Brooke Shields. I talked about this like 2 weeks ago on my second channel that I wanted to watch it because I discovered the movie Pretty Baby starring Brooke Shields, and I tried to watch it and I was like, oh, this is gross. It led to my discovery of this documentary, and it just kind of chronicles like her rise to fame, and it's just the story of her life, which is obviously very, very colored by exploitation of the media. It was a tough watch. Like, I just want to give Brooke Shields the biggest hug, but it was so informative and she's just so strong. Like, definitely a role model of mine. You can find that one on Hulu, or I guess also on Disney Plus if you have like the Hulu bundle with it. But now we can move on to all the non-horror movies of the month. There were a lot of them. I'll try to be brief. First up, we have Juno. I hadn't watched this since I was literally a child, and it definitely hits different as an adult. It was so sweet. I liked it even more now than I did as a kid because obviously now like I get it a little bit more. It also sent me on an Elliot Page bender, but more on that later. I watched the making of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and it made me cry because Guardians is its own special thing within Marvel. I think that they are the movies that had the most love poured into them out of the whole MCU. So yeah, I'm a real softie for it. Watching the making of was really special. I watched the short film Riley's First Date. It is a short film that came out after Inside Out. I think it's listed at like 12 minutes long on Disney Plus, but the short is actually only 5 minutes, and then there's at least 5 minutes of credits. It's actually kind of asinine. Like, I was a little blown away by that. It's fun, it's fine, it's cute. I also watched Accepted, and I had never heard of this movie until I just found it on DVD at some like vintage shop, and after watching it, I was mad about it. And if you haven't seen it, here's a synopsis. After receiving his latest college rejection letter, Bartleby Gaines devises a novel way to fool everyone into thinking he is college bound. Open his own university. He and his similarly stymied friends take over an abandoned building, create a fake website, hire a friend's uncle to pose as the dean, and presto, a school is born. I love this movie so much because sometimes comedies are even more earnestly written than dramas. Somehow it was one of the best movies I've ever seen about societal rejects coming together, both in protest and starting as something ridiculous, but then it totally turns into something real. It is a ridiculous movie. It is a mid-early 2000s comedy, but I loved it. I think that it was way too ahead of its time. Also, just considering how much college kind of frat humor was coming out around that same decade, like in the early 2010s as well. You had like Bad Neighbors. This was the earnest take on that. I loved it. I love Justin Long. He is the lead character. Blake Lively is there. Jonah Hill is there. It's a great cast. So check it out. Like, I think it's super underrated. As is The Marvels. I finally checked this one out, and don't get me wrong, it was like a 3-star film. Okay, I wasn't crazy about it, but I had a really fun time. Like, it kind of gave me what I wanted from it. I was belly laughing at all of the cat humor. The movie's ridiculous. And yeah, it felt pretty like inconsequential in terms of the grander scheme of things, but that's fine for me. I don't mind a fun little side quest. Honestly, I want to be getting more of that as opposed to Robert Downey Jr. coming back and making a bajillion figures and getting flown around in a little jet. Just 1 year after Bob Iger said that actors' demands were unreasonable. You gotta love this crazy backwards world we're living in. Anyway, also rewatched almost the entirety of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. We have one more to go. Still so fun, so perfect. My dad and I are gonna be ranking it over on the Patreon pretty soon, so yeah, maybe support me over there. Next up would be Repo Man. This is a little 80s flick, and I didn't know anything about it, but somebody sent it to me on physical media, so I popped it on. After being fired from his job, Los Angeles slacker and punk rocker Otto lands a gig working for an eccentric repossession agent named Bud. At first, he's reluctant, but he grows to love the fast-paced job. After learning of a Chevy Malibu that has been given a $20,000 price tag, Otto embarks on a quest to find the car with the beautiful Layla, who claims the trunk contents are otherworldly. So this was like another solid 3-star movie for me. I think that maybe upon a rewatch, I would have more fun with it. I don't know if I just like wasn't in the right zone for the movie. It definitely had its fun moments, and I really appreciate the lead actor. I forget what else I've seen him in. Actually, both of the leads. I really like both of them. But anyway, it's got a little bit of like a schlocky 80s charm. It's a little lower budget. It was made for $1.5 million, but it looks more expensive than that because it really is an inventive movie. Just something about that particular brand of irreverent humor wasn't quite clicking for me. I'm holding on to my Blu-ray though. I'll check it out again someday. Also finally watched Twister for the first time, which it was, it's not good, but it's fun. I'm gonna hold on to my DVD of that as well. I watched it for the first time before watching Twisters. So why don't we just lump those two together? I already talked about Twister and Twisters over on my Patreon. In fact, on Patreon, I did a little comparison video, and then last week I also did like a huge kind of podcast episode with my dad. We talked about Twisters a lot. We talked about spoilers. We talked about the career path of Glenn Powell and how hot he is. Yeah, sometimes I talk about that kind of stuff with my dad. It's fun. Especially because he gets it. I'll be like, yeah, Glenn Powell in that, white shirt and the cowboy hat. My dad is like, yup. Anyways, I also went to the re-release of The Lion King in movie theaters. I don't know the last time that I had watched The Lion King. It had been a really, really long time. Like, I might have been a child, but it doesn't matter because literally every single scene of that movie is carved into my neural pathways from obsessively rewatching it as a child. I took an adult gummy beforehand and Scott drove me, and that was wonderful. I was cracking up. For some reason, Timon's like puns and his dad humor, it was just, I was gutted. I also started crying as soon as Circle of Life started playing, like when the movie started, because just all these emotions were rushing back from my childhood. And it's just a beautiful movie. Like, it's just one of Disney's best. Oh my god. Anyway, next up would be Despicable Me 4, but yet again, my dad and I actually went to the theater to see that together. So that was another topic of our last sort of podcast episode. It's not an official podcast, but we're kind of getting there because me and my dad have become quite the gossiping girlies. We love talking about all the pop culture news and all of that from sort of the layman's perspective. And also, I'm Gen Z, I'm 25, my dad is 64, so he's a total boomer. So it's really fun having our perspectives come together. I don't know, I'm toying with like producing a full-on podcast. I don't know. Too many people have podcasts these days. I recognize that, and that really is my holdup. So let's feel it out. Let's feel it out. If I get some comments about it, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, last up for non-horror would be Wild Wild Things. And this one, oh my god, it had been on my watch list for such a long time. I don't want to read a synopsis for it because I did that before I put it on, unfortunately. And it spoils like one of the mid-act twists in the first act. It is one of the twistiest movies ever made. Like, it is so ridiculous and people kind of clown on it for that. I think that's what's beautiful about it. I said on Letterboxd that all movies should be like this. Just super sexy, super twisty, uber ridiculous, starring super hot people. Neve Campbell, Denise Richards, Kevin Bacon, another guy that I don't know his name. Oh, I was so happy to be there. Oh my god, that movie just brought me so much joy. In fact, if you all could please recommend to me some other 90s sexy crime thrillers, that would be great. I thought it was almost perfect. There are a few moments where like it dragged a little bit because it kind of is a longer movie, but I stand firm on my 4.5-star rating. I have decided I'm probably gonna wait like several years before I watch it again, even though I loved it so much. But if I wait all of that time, I am bound to forget a lot of the twists in the movie. And that's ideal. You should watch this movie as blind as you possibly can. I'm getting repetitive, but speaking of repetition, let's get into my horror movie rewatches. Why did this turn into like an early 2000s infomercial? Anyway, my first rewatch would be The Wicker Man from the 70s. This is a perfect film, actually. If I could have given it 6 stars, I would have. That's how passionately I feel about this movie. Be on the lookout this month, actually, for the original versus remake deep dive. Next up is 13 Ghosts. Had to throw this one on because I have a friend that is going through quite an awful breakup. We FaceTimed and watched 13 Ghosts together from afar, and it proved to be pretty good medicine. We also did a bunch of watch-alongs this month, so we watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 together. We also watched Texas Chainsaw 3D, which I've totally changed my tune on. Like, I love that movie. I think it's so fun. I think it's just about neck and neck with the Friday the 13th remake. Just in terms of quality, stupidity, fun, I've decided that I do love that movie. We also rewatched TCM from 2022 together, the one that Netflix did, and my tune has not changed on that one at all. I want to have fun with it so bad because there are a couple of really good sequences and some pretty gnarly kills. I want to be having fun, but it's just so bad and like not in a good way. The last rewatches of the month would be Killer Clowns from Outer Space and The Evil Dead, and you all will be so pleased to hear that I have completely done a 180 on these films. I think because this year truly has been the year of me just falling head over heels for 80s horror. I already loved it. There already were a lot of 80s horror films that I loved, but now I feel like I'm finally getting it. Maybe it's because I just turned 25 and that frontal lobe she's finally developed, but I'm finally getting it, okay? I gave Killer Clowns from Outer Space 4.5 stars. I think it's almost perfect. I loved it. The Evil Dead, I give it 4 stars, and historically, I don't think I've ever scored it higher than 2 stars, which is embarrassing to admit because like as soon as I love these movies so much now, it's like, ooh girl, but I'm not gonna delete those old reviews because it's my history, you know, it's my truth. I'm really glad to be part of the club now, but it is a little embarrassing to look back and just like disagree so strongly with my old opinions. But that was my 5th watch of The Evil Dead. That was my 5th time seeing that movie. The same thing actually happened to me with The Shining. It took until I think my 4th viewing to finally fall in love with that movie. That's why rewatching is important. Sometimes not even the second watch will do it for you. It takes till the 4th or 5th time. Or it just takes, you know, turning 25 and like having a fully developed brain. I don't know. That does it for all the rewatches. So let's get into the juicy stuff. All my new watches of old horror movies. And then finally at the end, we'll talk about new releases. First up, we have Hard Candy. This came out, I think, in 2005, starring Patrick Wilson, our boy, and Elliot Page. Haley is a precocious teenager who goes to a coffee shop to meet Jeff, the photographer she met on the internet. Jeff thinks he's in for a real treat, but things are not quite as they seem. Ugh. Girl, this was the hidden gem I didn't know I needed. It actually does have quite a bit of attention on Letterboxd, so I think that I'm just a little bit late to the party here because I was like 5 years old when this movie came out and I didn't know that it existed, to be honest. But I decided to go on kind of an Elliot Page bender because rewatching Juno, I was like, oh wait, yeah, I fucking love this actor. And I realized there was so much stuff like in his filmography that I hadn't seen. So I started with Hard Candy because I think that it was sent to me by Horror Pack. It like came in a Horror Pack box. And this movie is what promising young woman woman thinks it is. Promising Young Woman is feminism for idiots. Okay, I'm sorry, but I've said it before, I'll say it again, that like Emerald Fennell, I'm pretty sure she is my nemesis. I'm like joking, but like I'm not. If you want like a real feminist movie that will actually offer you like a ton of catharsis, go for Hard Candy. I'm not gonna get any more into the plot. It gets so disturbing. The layers of this man that become exposed and that are broken down. The character work that both of these people did, especially Patrick Wilson, it was so amazing to watch him play such a vile role and see all the ups and downs that his character went through. The two of them playing off of each other, like you might think that a single location movie that really only takes place in this one house with only these two characters, you might think that that gets boring. Bitch, no. Like I was on the edge of my seat for the entire runtime. Elliot Page was just like locked in from such a young age as an actor. Watching him, well, I think that he was like 18, but he was playing a 14-year-old in that movie. Truly just like a powerhouse. I really need to like follow his career a little bit more closely now. I'm like, ooh, let me stop because I'm being repetitive, but the next movie that I watched is also an Elliot Page film. It's called The Cured. This is one that somebody might have sent me on Blu-ray. I don't think this came from Horror Pack, but this one came out in 2017, so it was really interesting to jump from like 2005 Elliot Page to 2017. In this movie, society is trying to readjust when a cure is found for a disease that turned humans into zombies. The main character, Seenan, was formerly affected, and he is struggling to come to terms with his former actions. This is a very unique zombie movie because not only is this a movie that takes place sort of after the epidemic, it's like after a cure has been found, but all of the formerly afflicted have the memory of everything they did as a zombie. So imagine that you get bitten and then like you kill your best friend, and then a couple years later you get the cure and then you have to remember all of that. So the premise is super interesting, and this is not a bad movie, not by any means. I feel like it kind of was worth the one-time watch, but it is also kind of a feel-bad film. Like just the atmosphere of the entire movie is so heavy because I don't know exactly what the intention was, but maybe sort of like prisoner rehabilitation, reintroduction into society, and the difficulty sort of reassimilating. I think that's sort of what like the metaphor was. I just wish that they had done a little bit more with it. Everything just kind of felt like worst case scenario, and I just wasn't having a good time. Like, I don't know. I would recommend it as a one-time watch. It does have that typical kind of like IFC Midnight feeling to it. I don't know how to describe that, but if you've seen Oddity, which just came out, which I will be talking about at the end of this video, similar feeling. Like, I can't explain it. I don't know. Maybe just like Irish films just tend to hit me in that way, or movies from the UK, but it was a weird one. I won't be watching again, but maybe check it out, especially if you're really into the zombie subgenre or if you're really into Elliot Page. Also finally watched The Wicker Man from the early 2000s with Nicolas Cage for the first time. That was not very fun. We did a watch along and I thought it was gonna be really crazy and really funny because like it's Nick Cage and whatever, but it's so long and it's so boring. I'm not as stoked about covering that one in my original verse remake, but whatever, I'll save the rest of my thoughts. Next up would be Cemetery Man, which is such a little conundrum of a film. This came out in 1994 and it is currently streaming on Tubi. Something is causing the dead to rise from their graves as flesh-eating zombies, and cemetery custodian Francesco Della Morte grows tired of killing them all for the second time. However, the town politicians won't listen to him, so he's on his own. One day he falls for a beautiful woman whose husband has recently died, but their affair is tragically interrupted by zombies, sending him into a tailspin of madness and woe. Reading the synopsis, I guess that gives me a little bit better of a grip on what actually happens in this movie, because I didn't really get it. I do have it on DVD, it was sent to me, and this is one that I'm gonna hold on to because I feel like if I waited another couple years, you know, let that brain develop a little bit more, because I do think the studies are coming out that it's like, actually your brain's not really fully developed until you're like 30, which I believe that. I still feel like a child. But anyway, I couldn't really get a grip. Like, I just didn't really know what was going on in this movie. A lot of the times in certain scenes, the vibes were absolutely right. I can totally see why this movie is so beloved because it's so out there, and I guess maybe just like the brand of comedy maybe wasn't for me. I do understand why this is kind of a cult classic, like a very niche sort of favorite. I'm gonna have to give it another spin in another little while because it really wasn't for me. I couldn't really get my bearings at any time. I didn't know what was going on, just to be totally honest with you. So we can move on to the next movie, which would be Slither. Finally watched this, what is it, like 2008 James Gunn body horror film. Wheelsy is a small town where not much happens and everyone minds their own business. No No one notices when evil slips in quietly, but when people find mutilated livestock and a woman goes missing, Sheriff Bill Party discovers an alien organism that threatens to devour all of life on Earth. This movie, it almost a little bit could be seen as like a love letter to The Thing because of the assimilation element of it and also the body horror element of it, but it's done in a very gross, kind of like white trash way. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, I'm sorry. It's slimy. It's disgusting. There were parts that I just genuinely couldn't stomach to look at because there is a scene where it's not explicit essay in the way that humans usually perform it, but it is very clear that one of those scenes sort of is that. It's very much implied with like the body horror going on. It's very fucking disgusting and I feel like in very poor taste. It's just not my style of body horror. The fact that it is so invasive and like so disgusting and really is effective for me, like, yeah, you could argue, okay, well, that's probably a good horror movie. And maybe it will be for you, but like to me, that just makes me feel bad. I just have a bad time. Like, I understand why this movie is pretty underrated. It's not seen as like a cultural classic from the early 2000s, the way that something like Saw is, you know? This one's definitely a cult classic. It's a little bigger, you know, because James Gunn, he has a really big career now, but this would have to live very, very far away from like my top 10 lists from the early 2000s. Once again though, I will hold on to my Blu-ray and I will try to reevaluate it in maybe another few years because I did not know what to expect going into the movie. I didn't read a synopsis because I love going in blind, but sometimes like the downside of that is that really nasty shit will just throw me for a loop and then I'm like, I didn't like the movie. So I will revisit it, you know, having more reasonable expectations, and then I'll probably have more fun. We'll see. It did make me wish that James Gunn would return to form and go back to horror because I love the Belko Experiment, which I think he just wrote that one, but he's got a real knack for horror. Like I know he's doing the DC thing, whatever, but selfishly, I would love for him to come back to horror. Next up, we have Creep. This is yet another early 2000s movie. You'll notice that as a trend because I did just post my top 10 underrated horror movies of the early 2000s video. But anyway, in Creep, party-loving Kate wakes up in a London tube station to find the place locked up and deserted. With no choice but to stay there until morning, Kate soon finds that some things are much more frightening than being alone. Oh my god. So I just read like the Google synopsis. It said that this movie had a budget of $35 million and only made 1.7 million pounds in the box office. Girl, what? Okay, so this movie is bad, but you can watch it for free on either Amazon Prime or on Tubi. Yeah, I didn't have a good time with it, and I have been to London several times in the past few years. One of my besties lives there, and so we have done a fair amount of running around in the London Underground, and we always say to each other, it's my friend Tiago, a lot of you know who I'm talking about, we would always say to each other, like, it's so creepy down here. Like, they need to make more horror movies in the London Underground. This movie takes place entirely in the London Underground, and yet, oh, it was such a disappointment. I don't want to get too spoilery, but like also just so you have the right expectations. She runs around in the tunnels and then it basically just turns into Hostel. Like it's just not an interesting movie. It's maybe worth giving a go if you're feeling nostalgic for the early 2000s and you're like looking for a bad horror movie that you haven't seen before, like you don't want to just like rewatch another one, then maybe give it a go and you might have a little bit of fun, but like it's not very good. Otherwise, I don't recommend. The next two, Bones and Anatomy, I'm not going to talk about. Just check out last week's video and I will talk your ear off about them. Especially Anatomy. I will say that I highly recommend that one. I do. But the last new watch of an old horror movie that is, it's more of a drama horror. I don't know. It's called Flashback. I learned about this one from Ken Sledge because I did a little guest spot on his channel for a live stream this past week. And as soon as he said that it starred Dylan O'Brien and Micah Monroe, I was like, dude, say less. I watched it immediately, like right after the live stream. Frederick starts having horrific visions of a girl who vanished in high school. He reaches out to old friends with whom he used to take a mysterious drug, but soon realizes the only solution lies deep within his own memories. I don't know how else to describe this movie other than the depressed cousin of Everything Everywhere All at Once. When I was watching this, the echoes that I was feeling from Everything Everywhere, I was like, oh, I really caught the vibe that the Daniels saw Flashback and they were like, oh, we could make that but good. good, probably. I like very much have my suspicions now, and they're very similar movies, except that Flashback is bad and it like doesn't make sense. I had my phone down. I was watching the movie because I was really compelled, but I was so compelled by just utter nonsense. It thematically, I think, came through because it is about grief and loss. It's, sort of. Like, sort of. It's about just being a human, I guess. I think. I don't know. It is such a confusing movie. Like, you know what? Maybe I recommend it just so that maybe one of you could explain it to me. Like, I think I got what they were going for, but I'm only about 75% sure. It was so bizarre. I really thought that Maika Monroe didn't have any misses in her filmography. I'm learning that's not quite true, because this one and Villains, just not very good. Like, yes, she has a very hot co-star and she gets to kiss them and I'm really jealous, but they're just not good movies, unfortunately. This one I watched, I think with my Prime subscription. I feel like everything that I've said about it has really been a selling point. I give it 2 stars. Like, I wouldn't recommend it, but I do. Because maybe you could think of it like a challenge. Like, maybe you could take on trying to make sense of the movie. Because it was compelling and I do like the actors. It just really failed to come together for me. I don't quite know what it was. That'll do it for all my new watches of old horror. It's finally time to get into some new releases. Unfortunately, 2 out of the 4 of them I did get, well, not unfortunately, I gave them whole like solo reviews. So if when you get done with this video you still want to watch me blab for like another hour, then go watch those reviews, yay. Because I did do a review of Maxine and of Longlegs, and then also on the Patreon my dad and I did a spoiler chat of Longlegs. So there's a lot of content from me about those 2 movies out there already. What I will say though is that now at the end of the month I am just shocked at how quickly Maxine died off. I think a lot of us were just like really bummed out. Like, we were pretty disappointed, and then the very next week Longlegs came out and just totally shut out Maxine. I really did not see that coming. Kind of an unfortunate turn of events for us, but anyway. Next up we can talk about Baghead. This is a new Shudder release. A young woman inherits a rundown pub and discovers a dark secret within its basement. Baghead. It is a shape-shifting creature that lets one speak to lost loved ones, but not without consequences. Dude, everyone is ragging on this movie, and I get it. I do. It's not a good movie. I really enjoyed it. I actually gave it 3.5 stars. Not necessarily because I thought that it was good by any means, but if you saw my Letterboxd review, I did say that I think that it is basically the Bye Bye Man of this year. Like, it is bad. It has some pretty bad special effects. It is just not really well done. I still found it very, very entertaining. I unironically love the Bye Bye Man, and so I kind of unironically loved this movie too. Something about it was just right up my alley. It's a very, very specific kind of so bad that it's good. One that definitely does not resonate with most people. But if you're someone that loves the Bye Bye Man, then it's worth checking out. I can't promise you anything, okay? But I really enjoyed the movie. Much more than the masses, okay? Like, imagine my shock when I really enjoyed this movie just for like how goofy it was, and then I go on Letterboxd and I think it has an average rating of like 2.5 or something. Oh my god, it has a 2.3. And literally out of everybody that I follow, only 2 people gave it 2.5 stars. Everyone rated it lower than that. And then here I am, I'm like 3.5 stars. It was like the Bye Bye Man. I had a good time. I love when that happens for me. I really do. When everybody doesn't like a movie and I'm like, oh, sucks to suck. So I don't know, check it out. Like, I think it's worth just checking out. You can always turn it off, okay? The last movie of the month though, ooh, Oddity, baby. This one, speaking of IFC Midnight, we're coming back to it, alright? It's time to talk about Oddity. This is one that I don't want to give you a synopsis for. I'll show you a couple of brief images just so you get the general kind of aesthetic, the vibe of the movie. I don't want to give you a synopsis, and I don't want you to look it up because the opening of the movie totally took me off guard. Like, I was not ready for the opening of this movie, and had I read the synopsis, I wouldn't have been as taken by it. I knew nothing about this movie. All I knew was that it was kind of generating a little bit of buzz, so I was like, you know what, I gotta let the people know. But it wasn't playing at any theaters near me, so I had to drive to the next city over for a 10 p.m. showing of this movie. And I'm a grandma, I like to get to bed early, so I was like, okay, for the love of the game and for a movie that might actually scare me, I'll do it. And holy shit, it was worth it. It did. I don't know if this is the type of scary that is going to translate to the small screen. I went by myself drive to the next city over, so I didn't even have like my partner with me or anything. I had nobody's hand to hold, and there was nobody sitting in my row of the theater. There were several people like behind me, so I felt very much alone just being confronted with this giant screen playing a very scary movie. It is tough for me because I'm very desensitized. I watch horror movies literally every single day, and this movie, not just the jump scares, okay, this had really, really good suspense. It was to the point where like I really felt myself wanting to pick up my phone, and at certain points I would even like relax my eyes so it would get blurry, or I'd like go cross-eyed because I'm like, I don't want to see it. That probably sounds so fucking stupid. Does anybody else do that? Am I gonna admit to that on camera? Am I gonna leave it in? Ugh, editing Kylie, it's up to you. But I seriously was afraid to stare at the imagery of this movie for too long, lest it permeate my dreams. I'm the type of person that like, if I watch a movie that unsettles me, 100% it's making its way into my dreams. Nay, not dreams, nightmares, okay? I didn't want to have nightmares. For a movie to reduce me to the habits that I had when I was like in middle school, high school, like first really getting into actual scary movies, that's impressive. Okay, the only movie that did that for me last year maybe would be like Skinamarink and Talk to Me. This movie really had me going, okay? Not only for all of the horror elements, all the suspense, the jump scares, which were really, really expertly crafted, but the acting and the character arcs that these people go on, the drama that's unraveled throughout. I did find, I guess what you might consider like the main reveal, I found it to be very predictable, but I didn't mind that. Like, I don't always think that predictability is a bad thing, because when the movie itself is so tense and like all the different elements of it are so compelling, the fact that the main twist is predictable, it's not that much of a hindrance. It just made me really curious as to like, well, I know this reveal, but like how is everything going to unfold? And that I very much didn't know. I don't know that it completely stuck the landing with the third act for me. I ended up giving the movie 4 stars. I was kind of like teetering between 4 and 4.5 because I really, really liked it. Really liked it. I loved it. I actually loved it. The very ending, like the last shot of the film, I really, really liked, but there were just some parts of the third act that I was like, this could have been written like a little more cleanly maybe. But I had a great time. It really bums me out that this video might be coming out at a time when this is already out of theaters. I don't know, because my only option to see it was a 10 p.m. showing in a different city. But if nothing else, you know, this will be coming to Shudder probably at some point within the year, I would imagine. So when that time comes, then you know to look out for it. Once again, I'll be really bummed because I won't be able to say for certain if the tension and the scares and everything will work quite as well at home. This was an excellent, excellent theater film, and so I really, really hope that you guys can get out and see it. I would recommend going out of your way to see it the way that I did. I have no regrets about that. I'm so pleased to have ended this video on a high note. Sometimes we don't get to do that, but this is probably my favorite horror release of the year so far. I don't want to spoil my end of year ranking, but it's kind of looking like it's gonna come out on top. We still have Cuckoo, we have Trap, we have Alien, we have Nosferatu. Those are all coming out, but I really, really love this movie and I highly recommend it. This has been a long recap, but if you're not sick of hearing me talk, again, go check out my review of Maxine, my review of Longlegs. You can also check out my second channel. That's where I post all my travel content, like my 25th birthday vlog from Costa Rica that just came out. But I also post me traveling to physical media shops in other countries. I do a lot of physical media hauls and anti-hauls and just a lot of physical media stuff in general. And like I've already mentioned, I have a Patreon where I have sort of like a quasi podcast with my dad. I do bonus reviews over there like I did for Twister and Twisters. There's a weekly bonus video over there, so yeah, you get a lot of fun stuff. We love the patrons. They keep me afloat. Let's blow them several kisses. Mwah, 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 mwah. You can also follow me on social media, I guess, if you want. You know, go crazy, have fun. Everything is linked down below. More than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye.